Hello and welcome to Sunday Politics. It's been a turbulent 2024 for the DUP and its new leader Gavin Robinson. In his first conference speech as leader, he's been setting out his stall and he's pledged a change to how the party does business.
You will see that with a new leader, there will be a new approach, both internally and externally, as to how we do business.
The Deputy First Minister Emma Little-Pengelly is here to explain what direction Mr Robinson plans to take his party in. And we'll have analysis from the University of Liverpool's Professor John Tong, who was at yesterday's conference in Belfast. Plus, from the Downing Street Rose Garden to the Labour Party conference, which starts today, the Prime Minister and our political editor have both made the trip to Liverpool. I'll be talking to Enda McLafferty about his interview with Sir Keir Starmer and asking him to what extent Northern Ireland is on the radar of the new Labour government. Almost 6 months to the day since the DUP was rocked to its foundations with the news that its then leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, was facing accusations of historical sex offences, including rape, its new leader, Gavin Robinson, stood in front of the party's conference to set out his vision for the future. Under the circumstances, no one could have envied him that task. In a moment, we'll discuss where the party goes now with Emma Little-Pengelly. But first, our political correspondent Jane McCormack reports from yesterday's conference.
If autumn is a time for reflection and renewal, then sign the DUP leader up. Forget the Donaldson deal. It's the Robinson reset the party is squarely focused on now.
Reconnecting with people that we have lost in terms of voting for us is extremely important. And Gavin has already started on the reset, and that will and should continue.
Gavin's a man, the only man, as far as I'm concerned, and Northampton's concerned. We are more than happy with Gavin Robinson being our leader.
Gavin Robinson is no stranger to the conference stage, but this is a huge moment for him to stamp his authority on the party and to set out the direction he wants to go in.
You will see that with a new leader, there will be a new approach, both internally and externally, as to how we do business, which will be people-centred and focused on getting the right outcomes for the lives of all of our people. Although the next electoral test is some 2.5 years away, we must use the season ahead wisely. What we plant now, we must be ready to harvest, not for our party, but for Northern Ireland.
And while the reality of the past 6 months can't be rewritten,
if the message of Easter reminds us of anything, it's that the darkness of Good Friday has passed. We won't live in the shadows of yesterday, but walk in the light of today and in the hope of tomorrow.
When it comes to hopes for the union, meanwhile, the party's leading minister at Stormont had something to say about that.
Because the reality is this: happy, thriving people, happy, thriving families, no matter where you are in Northern Ireland, they don't agitate for change. They don't agitate for constitutional change. If you're happy and thriving in Northern Ireland, then I believe that's the best way to secure our future.
And as for those agitating for change within the DUP,
There's been an article this week about the party, Lee Reynolds, former advisor, saying, well, look, maybe you need to think about things like even a name change. Is that palatable, do you think?
I'm quite happy with the name, and I think most people will be as well. You'll know better than I, Jane, that the name is synonymous in Northern Ireland, and when people hear it, they have their own reservations, they have their own predilections.
I'm excited about where we are, and I'm excited. I have 2.5 years to defend the seat in North Down, and I'm thrilled to be here, excited to take on those challenges. I think there are lots of conversations happening internally and externally in the party. Lee certainly facilitated one of those in the last week.
It's my first conference, and I was so impressed. It would take a lot for someone to, disagree that Gavin's a man for the job. He instilled confidence that everyone's lost, I think.
But are the prospects for wider unionism as hopeful?
I think in the whole, we've built a foundation to move forward, and in all the parties there's younger candidates coming forward, younger people, and it's almost a reset for all of unionism moving forward.
The party has given Gavin Robinson a resounding thumbs up to get on with the job. But will it lead to the full reset he desires, or a partial rerun?
Jane McCormack reporting, and Emma Little-Pengelly, the Deputy First Minister, is with me now. Welcome to the programme. Gavin Robinson's only been the leader of the party officially since the end of May. It's been a very tough year for the DUP and it's still only September. Was his conference address yesterday all about steadying the ship?
Well, I think it was about a number of things. Yes, of course, reassuring people in terms of his leadership. But I think, as we've already seen there, just even in that short clip, it was about setting out his vision of the direction of the party. It was starting that very public conversation that he's obviously been working on for some time internally as well, around where he wants the party to get to. But I think it's also a very uplifting, it's a very positive, optimistic message about the future of the DUP, the future of unionism here in Northern Ireland. Yesterday was a showcase of some of the younger people in our party, very, very talented, capable young people coming through. So I think the future is very bright in terms of the party. But of course, we need to make sure that we realise that potential.
Yeah, well, of course you would talk about the future being bright, but the reality is, and you know this very well, the last 6 months have been difficult and challenging. Gavin Robinson's own words yesterday. Jeffrey Donaldson is gone, and in July's general election you lost 3 seats and the party's back to where it was in 2001. That is not the start any leader would want, is it?
Well, look, it's been an incredibly difficult year. I don't think anybody could have predicted the circumstances that happened, and indeed in a general election year as well. So it was always going to be tough. Look, no party wants to be losing seats. And I think when a party is in that position, of course, it is not just right, but it is a necessity to reflect upon that, to look at how we can improve things. And as Gavin highlighted, of course, the important thing is not just externally, but internally improving our processes, improving how we are going to bring what I believe to be our very strong case, our priorities, our policies to the people, and win back those people perhaps that we have lost.
But that is a challenge, because the reality is, and it's a pretty serious reality, you are now back to where you were as a party 23 years ago in 2001 in terms of Westminster seats and votes.
Well, in terms of seats, yes, but in terms of votes, I think when you look over the last number of elections, unionism has held reasonably strong in terms of the DUP vote, but we are not complacent. There is much to be done, and I think with Gavin we've got a very powerful, strong, energetic man with vision, and most, of course, importantly, Gavin is somebody who's also hugely empathetic. He is a good man who I think will do fantastic things for the party, and he has got a strong team around him, a strong leadership team, a strong team in terms of the Assembly, my ministerial colleagues in the DUP, our committee chairs, young people coming up.
Okay,
so there's a lot to work with, a lot of positives there.
Okay, so what is this Robinson reset going to look like then? He talked yesterday about changes internally and externally. So he's been upfront about that being necessary. You've said it's necessary as well. We'll come on to Lee Reynolds and the piece that he wrote for The Critic magazine in a moment. But he's very clear about a reset, a major reset that needs to take place. What do you think it's going to look like? How will we see it in action?
Well, I think any party leader coming into any party wants to look at how we've done business and how, I guess, you know, from their point of view, how did they put their stamp on that? How do they, in their view, improve upon? Because, of course, any party leader coming in wants the party to do better than it's done before. Part of that will be stabilising initially and then building from there. I have no doubt, I've known Gavin Robinson for a very long time. I know that he is somebody who is intelligent, strong, very, very passionate about the union, but he also cares about service. I think that came across very strongly in his speech.
But if he wants to do things differently in future and there needs to be a reset, it is implied very strongly, isn't it, that there must have been something wrong in the past that he needs to fix?
Well, look, I think any political party has to reflect when they lose seats. Of course we do. You don't want to be losing seats. If you're losing seats, then you're not in the place that you want to be. So, of course, we need to do things differently. We need to do things better. And I believe that Gavin Robinson, through that determination and strength and the passion that he has about this, will really bring forward those really positive changes. And as I said, look, we know that we are only in these positions, the party is only in its position because of the trust of the people, because people support it. And that's why service is incredibly important. Communication is incredibly important.
But it's not just about communication and service, it's about much more than that. I mean, Lee Reynolds says in this article, you should consider, for example, a name change because the DUP is a negative brand. The final line in his article is fascinating. I mean, the whole article is fascinating, given that it's coming from somebody who used to be your director of policy. He says he's a fan of the leadership of Gavin Robinson, but his last line is this: inaction is decline, action is growth, it is time to act. You accept that?
Yep, and we will act, absolutely. And Gavin set that out in a very positive way. That action will be externally and internally. We'll be improving our processes. We will be assessing what went wrong. And I think over the course of the next number of weeks and the next number of months, Gavin Robinson will be setting out very clearly the actions he will be taking to implement his vision of a strong DUP, focused on service, focused on delivery, and winning back those hearts and minds of the people.
OK, well, we look out for that, and keen to talk to you about it in this studio as the weeks and months unfold. Let's talk about migration. Gavin Robinson talked yesterday about what he called the legitimate issues around illegal migration that need to be debated and to which a UK-wide solution needs to be found. Now, your party talks about protecting Northern Ireland from illegal immigration, one of your election pledges, of course, and you defended those peacefully protesting against illegal immigration during the summer. But what's your view on protecting legal migrants, those people who have moved to work here, who provide a service, but who have come under attack simply because they're regarded by their attackers as clearly identifiable outsiders?
Look, racism is always wrong. Violence is always wrong. The disorder and violence that we saw on the streets of Northern Ireland, albeit by a small minority, it was called out, and it was called out clearly by myself, by Gavin Robinson, and indeed welcomed across the political spectrum, people coming out to call that out. Let's be very clear about that. And I think it's really important that we differentiate that from people who have concerns around illegal migration. And I think that's the point that Gavin Robinson is making. Of course, people have very genuinely held concerns, particularly around illegal immigration and migration. But that is very different.
But that's not what we were talking about. I mean, the criticism that has been levelled against your party and some of those who spoke out at the time of the violence over the summer was that you were yoking together legitimate concerns about illegal migration with people who live and work here legally and who were being attacked because of their religious faith or the colour of their skin.
Absolutely not. The DUP was really categorically clear about this. I know this because I said it repeatedly. Violence is always wrong. Racism is always wrong. When you look at some of those who were targeted over the summer, these were people who were here legally. There were people who had set up businesses, invested in those businesses. Now, why was it happening? I think people were being caught up in terms of a racist narrative being applied to people who perhaps had genuinely held concerns, but people being offered and dragged into. People must not do that. These are very, very different issues. Of course, there needs to be a debate around migration, the supply and demand issues, for example, on public services, the impact on communities. That is entirely separate. It can never be a justification for violence. It can never be a justification for racism.
But the criticism that's been levelled against some of your representatives is that while there may have been criticism of the violence, it still came in the context of apparently legitimately expressed concerns about, for example, things like housing. Look, there were a number of individuals who spoke to the Executive Office Committee during the week, and I'm sure you saw their testimony. Very powerful testimony from Dr. Naomi Green from the Belfast Islamic Centre, who said, let me just quote her, "There are voices within the political and media space who continue to speak of legitimate concerns in a way that subtly excuses attacks and prejudice on minority communities in Northern Ireland. There is nothing legitimate," she said, "about fuelling resentment and scapegoating Muslims or other minorities for complex issues like housing shortages or economic difficulties, and you will not resolve them by scapegoating us." Is Dr. Green right?
And that is absolutely not what the DUP did. I completely dispute any allegation that the DUP did that. We were categorical. I could bring you up 10, 20, 30 statements that made it very, very clear that the violence and disorder was wrong.
Yeah, but there was still a mention also about these legitimate concerns, which are a completely separate issue. Nothing to do with the violence that Dr. Green's talking about.
But let's be very clear. There are genuinely held concerns about illegal immigration, about access to houses and housing. Now, refusing to acknowledge that doesn't help the issue.
But the people who were being attacked, the people who were being attacked were here legally and were working in the health service, working in education, running businesses. They are not illegal migrants who are putting pressure on
and
housing.
I'm absolutely aware of that. And what I'm saying to you is...
So why did people keep talking about legitimate concerns when it wasn't relevant?
There was no attempt to conflate the two. the statement...
Why did people mention the two things in the same statement?
Because people acknowledge there are legitimate concerns or genuinely held concerns by some people about issues, but that is entirely different from disorder, violence and racism. That's the context in which it was said. We need to be very careful not to retrospectively put something or conflate things that did not happen. And let's be very clear, the message being sent out, including this morning, to those that were under attack, to those that feel scared, is very, very clear. The DUP strongly stands against all racism, all disorder on the basis of that racism, absolutely. And that is completely separate from people who have genuinely held concerns
just to be
about
absolutely
housing
clear, there
and
is no
illegal
doubt that
immigration.
representatives from the DUP condemned the violence. No question about that. Nobody's suggesting otherwise. But there was criticism levelled at your party by your political opponents who said that it was inappropriate for you to confuse the issue of illegal migration with legal migration, and that people were being attacked because of the colour of their skin and their religious convictions, and it had nothing to do with whatever these so-called legitimate concerns about housing were concerned. You will have heard that criticism at the summer. I'm simply asking you about it now. Do you think it was a confused message? You could have been clearer.
No, I don't believe it was a confused message. But I would also make very clear, look, that the DUP are here to listen to people on the ground. We are here to listen to people who have genuinely held concerns. The worst thing that a government can do, the worst thing that a political party can do, no matter where they are, is ignore genuinely held concerns, because that's exactly then how things end up spiralling. Because those people with genuinely held concerns get dragged into narratives, being offered so-called solutions or reasons that are not true. So it's important that political parties do get down on the ground and talk and listen to people. I will never apologise for that. We will always do that in the DUP. We're very much on the side of people. We're here to listen to people, and we will listen to those concerns. But importantly, people may have a genuinely held concern that actually isn't accurate, and it's important that political representatives can come down, listen to people, talk to them and outline the factual context of that as well.
Your leader yesterday referred to the Windsor framework and his approach to dealing with it and securing Northern Ireland's rightful place in the UK in terms of its trading place, as he put it yesterday. If those conversations about tweaking that further and adjusting it further don't go the way you would like them to go, are you going to boycott meetings of the North-South Ministerial Council as you did in the past?
Well, look, as Gavin set out very clearly yesterday, we're all about delivery. The three ministers participated in a panel where we outlined what had been achieved already. Great movement in terms of childcare and the childcare scheme. Work is continuing. The announcement of the football stadia scheme in terms of applications, and hopefully a positive announcement on that. We've got our draft programme for government out. We are about delivery and stability in terms of government. Does that mean that we are not going to pursue necessary changes in relation to our trading relationship?
What happens if it doesn't
not.
go the way you want it to go? That's my question, because you've already had your wrists slapped by Stormont Standards Commissioner for 5 DUP ministers not attending North-South ministerial meetings back in 2021. The Commissioner published her ruling just after the election in July, and she was very clear. And I'm just simply asking, and I'll take a yes or a no, is that kind of action, that kind of boycott action, going to happen again?
Look, it's completely legitimate for the DUP to have taken a stand, which was all about not implementing something that was going to cause... Well, it did. In terms of the Windsor framework and the following safeguarding the Union, significant changes, Mark, significant changes
you broke the rules
on the protocol. So what did it achieve? It achieved significant improvements in terms of
So you'll do it again? If it achieved something this time,
trade. Look,
will you do it again?
Well, let's be very clear. The DUP, as I said from the outset, is all about establishing that stability, delivering in government and making sure that Northern Ireland can work.
Well, is that a yes or a no? Are you going to do it again?
We will continue to work with the UK government and to work with others to ensure that those changes that are required to ensure the free flow of that trade, east-west, west-east, is fully implemented in terms of the commitments.
Will you boycott the North-South Ministerial Council in future?
Well, we are all about creating stability, Mark.
So that's... you wouldn't like to. You wouldn't like to. Can I read that into it?
Look, as I said, Gavin Robinson set this out very clearly yesterday. We are in government to deliver for people, deliver on the issues that matter to people, and we are creating the stability to enable that to happen. That doesn't mean that we are not going to pursue those necessary changes.
Very quick final word. I'll take it in a sentence. What are you going to do about those unionist purists who Edwin Poots says are going to lose the union? Because you said you want people to focus on delivery for Northern Ireland and people will stop talking about constitutional change.
Well, look, I think right at the heart of that is delivery for people on the issues that matter. And I think, my unionism is a strong, positive, forward-looking unionism. I believe there are many, many people within the DUP who are passionate about this, elected representatives there as MLAs, as local councillors, working together as a team, we'll be making that strong case.
All right, we need to leave it there. We're out of time. Emma Little-Pengelly, thanks very much indeed. Listening to that, Professor John Tong from the University of Liverpool. When you were at the conference, I'm sitting alongside Emma today, listening to what she had to say. What do you think, first of all, we should make of the speech given by Gavin Robinson? First speech as the new leader of the party.
Well, I think it was the quietest, most low-key DUP conference I've ever been to. That's the first thing to say. Attendance was well down, and they were meeting in reduced circumstances. Gavin Robinson's speech was all about the damage done by unionist disunity. It was all about, basically, we need a united unionist voice. He would say that, wouldn't he, after an election result where DUP losses were precipitated partly by divisions within unionism. So we're not going to hear the language of where Jim Allister is called a dead-end unionist, which we heard only a few months ago. The tone was completely different. I still don't think the DUP knows which particular political direction to go in. That's understandable. When you've lost seats to Alliance, the UUP and TUV, what do you make of those results? And I think that's the difficulty that Gavin Robinson has. Basically, it was a call for unionist unity. He says he's not going to engage in unionist infighting. He did say in respect to the institutions, whilst he didn't mention the North-South Ministerial Council, he said no one thinks it was a mistake to return to the institutions. That, to me, is definitely ruling out the DUP pulling out of Stormont ever again. So at least we know that. But he was keeping the North-South Ministerial Council option open potentially. He referred to what he called the constitutionally outrageous protocol, said that the DUP had got some improvements, but they clearly went nowhere near enough for him.
Yeah, and clearly Emma Little-Pengelly hasn't closed the door on future boycotts of the North-South Ministerial Council, certainly in that conversation today. What about the criticisms of people like Lee Reynolds? Gavin Robinson says there's going to be change. Lee Reynolds says there needs to be change. What kind of change are we looking out for?
Well, yesterday was a veritable thesaurus of the R word in terms of rebuild, restructure, relaunch, reset. But we didn't get any clarity as to what that would mean, other than the appointment of a new director of party development in Keith Buchanan. But where else do the structural reforms come? We were left in the dark on that. Gavin Robinson said he would have a different set of relations both internally and externally. Does that mean clearing out the dead wood? We know in terms of the profiling yesterday, it was of younger members of the party. But I think the emphasis is on delivery. I mean, probably the best session yesterday was where people like Paul Given were talking about what they'd done in terms of education, delivering, childcare and early learning. That's going to be the message from the DUP. We can deliver within the executive. I don't think that you can really relaunch. You can't rebrand the party. The good news for the DUP is at least everyone is united around Gavin Robinson as leader. I mean, DUP has stood for a decidedly unhappy party quite often in recent years. The party is actually probably more united now, but born of pretty grim circumstances.
You talk about delivery, and not surprisingly, the Deputy First Minister wanted to talk about delivery in our conversation today as well. The issue is there is a real challenge in terms of being able to deliver. Take, for example, programme for government. There are 9 key projects that we're going to work towards. One of them is cutting health service waiting lists, and elsewhere in the document it says, but actually we can't do that at the moment because we haven't got the money to do it.
And they won't be getting the money. I mean, I'm heading straight to the Labour Party conference in Liverpool after this. There'll be no more money. Northern Ireland barely registers in the Labour conference agenda, and there's no money.
And that's a real challenge, isn't it?
Look at Labour's manifesto. All it promised was discussions with the parties over a new financial framework for Northern Ireland. Well, that can mean everything and nothing. And the fact is that almost certainly extra money will be accompanied by a demand for local revenue raising, and we're back to the issues of water charges, arguments over prescription charges, etc., etc.
OK. John, for now, thank you very much indeed. We'll talk to you again a little bit later. Let's turn to the Labour Party conference, which is taking place in Liverpool this week. The Prime Minister's honeymoon period didn't last very long in the end, and he's been under pressure on several fronts in recent weeks. Our political editor, Enda McLafferty, is in Liverpool for the conference, and he joins me now from the venue. And welcome to you. The pressure, of course, has ranged from winter fuel payments to who pays for the Prime Minister's clothes to that decision on Casement Park. It's coming at Keir Starmer in every direction at the moment.
Yes, Mark, a real lesson on how not to prepare for what should have been a lap of honour for the Labour Party after their historic election victory. Returning to power, of course, after 14 years, but instead of being on the front foot coming into the conference, they're very much on the back foot because, as you say, of those free suits, free glasses and free stadium seats for Keir Starmer. The party has struggled to cut through the noise around that and to get back once again setting the narrative. The other great problem, of course, is the operation at number 10, the fact that he's having to deal with leaks now. That's put Sue Gray, of course, back in the headlines again over the fact that she earns more than Keir Starmer. And even today, Keir Starmer is saying he's now going to fix that problem. But a couple of days ago, he had to remind us that he's in control. And that's not a good look for a new Prime Minister just 2 odd months into the job.
So, Enda, you interviewed Sir Keir Starmer at the end of last week in Downing Street Rose Garden. Did he look up close to you like a man under pressure?
Well, he looked like a man, I think, who was blindsided by the public reaction to the news, of course, that he wasn't paying for all his suits and, of course, those other freebies that he has got down through the years. He didn't really understand the depth of public anger out there. For him, it was a rules issue, the fact that he abided by all the rules in Westminster, and he didn't really get or read the room about what the reaction was in the wider community across the UK, not least, of course, because the government now is taking money out of pensioners' pockets. So I think he's tried to rectify that by insisting in the past few days that he's going to accept no more free gifts. But his big task of work here is to try and change that narrative completely. And instead of focusing on what's been a difficult couple of months for the party, talking up these big decisions they're going to have to make, the £22 billion black hole, he's going to have to present some more positive views looking forward about what life is going to look like under a Labour government in the UK. And I think that's going to be his big challenge over the course of the next few days.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. John Tong has just said there is no extra money for Northern Ireland. He's going over to join you at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool after this programme today. And the reality is, just briefly, Northern Ireland barely registers on this conference agenda.
Yes, that's right, Mark, and that is always the case. You could say on the wider radar here, Northern Ireland occupies a very, very small corner. They will, of course, be in the spotlight tomorrow. We have Secretary of State Hilary Benn delivering his keynote speech, and we also know that it features around the fringe events at gatherings like this. We know, for instance, Sinn Féin holding an event this evening, the SDLP holding a Brexit event later in the week, and we also know that the First and Deputy First Ministers have been invited to a business event later this afternoon, but we're not sure if they're going to attend, Mark. We're just going to have to wait and see.
OK, and we'll leave it there. Thanks very much indeed. We've just time for a final word with John Tong. So, I mean, Northern Ireland, it's not just that it doesn't feature on this agenda, as it very often doesn't. It's that it doesn't really feature within the Labour Party priorities in government at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, Northern Ireland, there was only 2 specific pledges for Northern Ireland in Labour's manifesto, and one of them has already run into trouble because Labour said it would repeal and replace the Legacy Act. Well, that is going to be interesting now because of the Court of Appeal's decision a couple of days ago, where the Court of Appeal said that the Information Commission, that new commission, wasn't fit for purpose. It would breach the European Convention of Human Rights the way it was operating, because Hilary Benn, as Secretary of State, would still be able to withhold state papers, and also some families of victims wouldn't get legal aid. Labour's got a decision to make now. Do they come up with a new body to replace that Information Commission or not? Or do they try and stick with it and reframe that? And the other thing is the financial issue that we mentioned. There's no new money for Northern Ireland, no commitments to new money for Northern Ireland. It is, as Enda said, very much on the margins, Northern Ireland, at the Labour Party conference. There is action on the fringe. Mary Lou McDonald will be speaking on the fringe tonight at a Sinn Féin meeting. But beyond that, little of substance on Northern Ireland. OK, I've got to leave it there, John. Good to talk to you as always. Enjoy Liverpool, and we'll see you talking about the other conferences over the next few weeks. That is it for today. I'll be back with you on Thursday at 10:40 on BBC One, and if you want to catch up on today's programme, you'll find it on iPlayer. For now, though, from everyone in the team, thanks for watching. Have a good day from all of us.